Hey, everybody, you're turning in. Sorry, everybody. It's kind of early. Hey, everybody, you're tuning into the Canary Cry News Talk live stream, pre-stream. My gosh, you did it. And it's Labor Day, so congratulations for those who get the day off. We are going to be doing just a quick show. It's a little bit of a sort of an augmented show today because we're also going to try to take a little bit of time off today, but that's why we're here so darned early. But I do want to give a congratulations to Swagular over on YouTube. Good job, Swagular, and good name. All right, folks, just a reminder, make sure to follow us on multiple locations. There's many of you who have not done this, and I understand. You're just waiting until it's a necessity. And I'm just warning you, don't wait until it's a necessity. There's tens of thousands of people who didn't listen to us before our other YouTube channels got canned, and they've never made it back to the show. So go follow us at different locations all over the place over at CanaryCry.Party, CanaryCry.Party. Okay, so yes, a bit of an augmented show. Hope it doesn't give you too much whiplash. Stay hydrated. Let's go.
The world is getting crazier. People are acting more and more insane. The end of the world is tomorrow. Tomorrow. There's only one thing to do when the world is falling apart. Listen to Basil and Gonz as they discuss this week's news and events through the lens of Bible prophecy.
You are listening to Canary Cry News Talk.
You're listening to Canary Cry News Talk. Today is September 6, 2021. This is episode 385. And today, Heard in Humanity. Basil, I'm your best buddy, Basil.
And this is Gonz, your favorite Asian provocateur for Christ. Welcome to the podcast where we bring you the best news, which is the gospel message of Jesus Christ, while reporting the egregious with a well-rounded, biblically grounded take on world events. And Basil, we're here on Labor Day. We're going to cut things a little bit shorter so we can hang out with family and friends and all that. But the show must go on. We have to at least get a little bit in before we go do that. So here we are.
Yeah, you know, and part of the problem is with these potential days off in such a roiling period of history is if we didn't just make the attempt to at least get the news out there and analyze it as we go, it's just going to pile up. It's just going to pile up for Wednesday, and we'd be kicking ourselves anyways.
Speaking of piling up, we are not we're not going to do a whole segment on thanking producers today, but we do see you, and we will thank you on Wednesday's show, episode 386, just because we want to, give everybody the due time.
Yeah, more officially, we will be crediting producers for this episode, but we're not going to do a producer segment until Wednesday's show. Yeah. So there you go. For all you people who skip the break or hate the break anyways, you'll get your medicine today. I have a quick little announcement, Gonz, before we get too far into the show. Oh, I forgot my cough button.
You have a throat button. You should use it.
I forgot to grab it. Yeah. So early, I can't even think straight. Yes. Okay. So announcement. So many people may remember, this is way back before we even started doing this format of this show, but people who have been longtime listeners of Canary Cry anything will remember. Now, we're a bit infamous, Gonz, for during our career hyping up things before they have taken any sort of actual legitimate form in the world. It's one of those cute little quirks that I
don't know what you're talking about.
I think we've grown out of it recently.
Maybe.
I think we've grown out of it because I think it came from some deep part of ourselves that wanted to do more, but just didn't have the consistency or the time or a lot of overestimation of our own abilities. But anyways, now that we do this show, I think we've grown out of wanting to do that. But those might for those who might remember, in 2019, I started hyping up a new podcast that I was working on called Ravel. That's right. We even put out a trailer. I had a bunch of episodes in the can. It was going to be a fun, new, exciting sort of biblical scripture-based investigation podcast. I had teamed up with somebody, with a smart person, like I do. And, as it happens, that podcast never ended up airing. And it's been 2 years now since that. But I want to, if you've made it to this Labor Day show, you get the first announcement. Myself and one Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates has been working for months now on putting together a new podcast and podcast series called Ravel. And yesterday, Gons, we popped our first 3 episodes. We did it. Yeah, we're going. We're doing. It's going to be fun. And yes, I feel like an adult the way that we've gone about doing it. We've got like a number of episodes in the can. They're like scheduled out to actually release over the next few weeks. It's awesome. And yes, just a couple of notes about it. It's called Ravel. Now, since we got all the domains, we got the RSS feed, we locked down our Apple Podcast account, we did everything. We nailed it the first time around in 2019. And so we've had our little trailer up for 2 years. And wouldn't you know it, Gons, somebody else started a podcast named Ravel. And Gons, we've been doing this for almost 10 years now. We can technically consider ourselves podcast veterans, I think.
Yeah.
Pioneers in the medium. And what's the first thing you do when you want to start a podcast or even think about a podcast?
You Google to find out if other people have the name of the podcast you're starting.
That's right. Yeah. And you start with Google, and the second thing you do is you actually search Apple Podcasts. Like, does this already exist? Mm-hmm. And my Ravel has existed, is technically taken up the address on the Apple Podcast. Has been there all over the place, our little trailer. But this other Ravel either didn't think to look or blatantly, aggressively tried to take over my turf, man.
Yeah, well, it is a turf war. The linguistic turf war of the internet really domain and name system here.
It really is. And so, anywho, Chris and I, we went back and forth about like, wow, do we just concede and let them take it and think of a new name? And Gons, you know me. You know how I operate. So we've sort of got an unofficial turf war going on with another podcast named Ravel. And the thing that I want to personally ask the listeners of Canary Cry News Talk for as a personal favor, and I know I do this a lot, but this one really means something to me. If you could search your Apple Podcasts for Ravel, that's Ravel, you'll see 2 of them. The one with the good logo is mine. You'll see there's one with the bad logo. There's a one with the good logo. The one with the good logo is mine. Please go subscribe to it and rate and review. The ratings and reviews coming in early like this especially will be super helpful in my all-out offensive against those dirty, rotten podcast name stealers. And thank you very much. I would really appreciate if everybody did that. And I think you're really going to appreciate Ravel. And I'm only going to give one last little warning here. This is a podcast that is meant for normal people. It is not fringy in the sense that we're used to, we refer to fringy. It's not conspiracy stuff. It's not any of that stuff. It's exploring the Bible, exploring scripture, exploring society and scandal.
I just pulled up the Apple podcast of the podcast just to kind of take a look here, and
got some tweaking to do. Be careful. I'm fragile, Gons.
It says that listeners also subscribe to You Have Permission, Ex-Evangelical, which I think is like a podcast for ex-evangelicals, The Bible for Normal People, and the Nomad podcast. And you showed up next to...
You know what this is?
Yeah.
You know what this is? So the other Ravel podcast is sort of like
anti-biblical.
I think it's in that vein. Well, it's sort of like...
so am I looking at the other Ravel?
I don't know. Hold on. Let me look at the stream.
Oh, yeah, I might be, because this is 53 episodes.
Gons, you did the thing. This is already going to be a disaster. Oh no.
Well, because it talked about Christian theology, I thought it was it, but
you get that? I mean, that's what I mean.
Okay.
The other Ravel is also about Christianity, and it's like a deconstructionist type of thing. Okay, get it out of there. All right,
I'm getting it out. Sorry, I got to find your
this
Ravel.
Is already terrifying.
Where's your Ravel?
It's on Apple Podcasts, but I actually had a hard time pulling it up on desktop. Now, if you go on your phone and you search for Ravel, they both come up. Oh no, Gons. This is already going to be a disaster. Okay, everybody, go on your podcast player. I don't know how far and wide the RSS has been spread. I don't know if it's made it to all the platforms yet. You kind of got to wait for the system on all those platforms to catch up. But it is on Apple Podcasts. It's the one with the white background logo and the kind of ball of yarn looking thing with colors. That's it. Go do that. And please leave a rating and a review, because we've got some ground we have to gain from the other Ravel. Did you find it?
Yeah, I had to kind of finagle, but there you go. Yeah, Basil Rosewater and Christopher Ryan Gates. That's
right. I should put Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates just to give you a frame of reference on how long it took us. Now, there's a lot of reasons why what happened over the past 2 years, and we explain it all in the episode Hello World 2.0, which I hope everybody listens to the podcast in the order in which the episodes come out. It's one of these things that really builds on itself as it goes. So there you go. Please listen to Hello World 2.0. You can hear the full story of what happened. And it was just the way that the Lord wanted it to happen. It was out of my hands. It was out of Chris's hands. It wasn't just us being lazy and not putting out the podcast. There's a lot of very serious, unavoidable things that kept it away from us for 2 years, but it's there and it's cool. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, it's not sort of for your crazy friends. It's for people who are sort of intentionally wanting to approach the Bible, approach Christianity in its long and many different, its long history and through the forms that it's taken, to really try to understand the world of Christendom and society in a thoughtful way. And we've got some great guests, really interesting guests coming up, and Gons, we're going to hopefully find some time, if at all possible, with you to help introduce the world to, I don't know, some good topics. So there you go. I hope you like it. I hope you check it out. I'd really appreciate it if you shared it and rated and reviewed it, so I can defeat those podcast name stealing heretics over at the other Ravel podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm very excited, and I want to know what people think.
Okay, cool. Just real quick, because it's Labor Day, and we've spent 15 minutes on the Ravel promo at the top here. We're not sponsored by Ravel, just so
get used
people
to it,
know.
Folks.
A couple fun facts about Labor Day as we get into today's show. Did you know that Labor Day is the informal end of hot dog season?
Wow.
Yeah.
I, I, I guess I didn't know that. But
well, now you
it
do.
is possible.
Dropping facts on this podcast. The other thing is that the first Waffle House opened on Labor Day in 1955 in Avondale Estates, Georgia, and it is the long succession which has allowed people like Ben Shapiro to promote his waffle makers.
Everybody loves waffles.
It all started on this day, 1955.
Wow. That's incredible.
All right. Well, that's my little bit there at the beginning. Unlike yours, it was 30 seconds. We're going to start with the Flippy update.
Flippy update.
Do you want fries with that?
All right, folks, just a quick Flippy update. For those who don't know, Flippy is the colloquial name for the disembodied robot arms that are taking our jobs, enslaving our children, and flirting with our spouses. We use talking about Flippy as a way to explore all the new, fun, and exciting ways that robots are taking over the world. Now there's nothing we can do about it. Today, the Flippy update is coming from TheVerge.com, and the headline is New Published Patents Show Dyson Designed for Stair Climbing and Drawer Opening Robots. Dun, dun, dun. Premium vacuum company Dyson has patented designs for robots that look like they could climb and clean stairs and open drawers. New filings show. It's not clear whether the designs are for forthcoming products or ideas that are on hold, but Bloomberg reports that Dyson's robotic unit has been working on a robot to interact with other home appliances, whether it's the robot hand or the stair climbing robot or other product entirely. Also isn't clear at this point. The patent published in the UK on September 1st show the two designs, a robotic device with TriStar wheels and actuated arm that would be able to climb steps and clean them. A stair climbing vacuum sounds like an excellent idea. And a robot hand, which is shown in drawings with the patent application holding a mug, and which is making me envision it bringing me a cup of coffee at this early hour. Whoa, weird, like, confluence of this author
and
working unusually working early and dreaming about robots bringing the coffee, and me working at an early hour.
It's not that early though, man. It's almost 10 a.m. where we're at. It's like 1 p.m. on the East Coast.
Well, yes, that is how time works, Gons. I understand. But yes, this is anyways, the usual caveats about patent supply, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. I thought this was interesting. Dyson, not a robotics company, a vacuum company, putting in patents for robot arms specifically, which we cannot ignore. I thought the opening drawers detail was a little bit strange.
Yeah, what is it snooping around? What's it doing?
You know, there's this sort of cartoonish trope, you know, where a robber pretends to be a maid or something and comes in and is vacuuming, but then vacuums up all the jewels out of the jewelry box, you know, and then keeps on going. That's how I think Dyson is turning into a home theft corporation. We're just going to build robots. They're going to pretend to clean the place, but they're also going to be able to break into the medicine cabinet and the jewelry box, and we can vacuum up all of the goodies.
I just can't wait. I can't wait for the James Dyson infomercial. You know, the British guy, the inventor of Dyson. He has that accent. No, you know what I'm talking. You don't know what I'm talking.
I don't think I know that one.
You've never seen a Dyson infomercial? Or a commercial, just a regular commercial even.
You know, it's been about a decade since I've sat down and watched cable television. So if it's not an ad on Hulu, I'm probably not going to get it.
It makes vacuuming sound like the craziest science ever. Mm-hmm. We've invented the cyclone device.
Oh, I have seen stuff like that.
Yeah, it's some crazy. Yeah, anyway, I'm waiting for that. We've invented the robot arm.
We've captured the physical existence of black holes and put a little tiny black hole inside of each of our products. I think it's interesting, especially coming from Dyson, a non-robot company, to want it to be, getting into the robot game, and then also to have the Verge report on it is its own interesting detail. Now, it's probably a native ad. Dyson probably paid to have some of these stories written, because what self-respecting news outlet is going to just be combing the patent office records for a vacuum company's patents?
We know the end game is the Dyson sphere, the hypothetical megastructure that completely encompasses a star and captures a large percentage of its power output. So this is just the beginning of that. You started with vacuum cleaners, and you got a robot arm. The end game is a star sucking
harness
energy
the
sucking
cosmic energy of a star.
So they got to make steps. They got to keep the public aware. And what better way to do it than to leak the designs on the Verge?
Yeah, there you go, Dyson. We've got our eyes on you.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some stuff here. Again, shorter episode today. We're going to just tackle some stuff and get on out of here. We got some WACCINE updates.
WACCINE. A pandemic special.
So we've been talking about the two narratives, narrative A and narrative B, when it comes to the pandemic, quote unquote. And I want to just start with the headline, and then we'll get into a story here. This is Newsweek, mirrored on MSN. Mu COVID variant, possibly vaccine resistant, most prevalent in these U.S. states.
Yeah, no kidding.
You had mentioned in the last episode, deja vu, that you don't think that this is going to take hold. I tend to agree with you for the most part, but it's just kind of interesting how they need to have that fear cycle. And they have to have the headlines like, oh no, it's moo time. And Hawaii, Maine, Connecticut, they have 39, 42, and 73 mu cases sequenced. Shut it down. We're all going to die, basically.
We're all going to die.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, great analysis. Thank you for that.
I don't know what else to say about it. It is this variant thing. When the first variant came out, we made a big deal about our prediction that this is just going to be endless variants. And the science says, you don't vaccinate during a pandemic because, like antibiotics, and that was a weird way to say that.
Antibiotics.
It's
kind of like Fauci's dater. I think I isolated that somewhere. Oh, I did. Yes.
The dater on the antibiotics.
Here it is. This is Fauci saying
DA when they get the dater.
Dater.
The dater.
A dater tater. Yeah. So,
right,
yes, it is the very act of vaccinating during a pandemic that creates vaccine resistant strains.
Yeah.
And this term variant becoming a new sort of linguistic trigger for generations to come, specifically because of, this COVID situation. So I don't know. I don't think mu is going to be the one to end society. We got to wait for Omicron for that. But it's interesting how in a matter of like 2 weeks, it went from, oh, we heard about this thing called mu, and then boom, it's in every state. It's right behind
these states. These 3 states with under 200 cases total. But it's interesting because
it was found in 47 states.
Oh, really? No, it's just 3 here.
I read somewhere it has been detected in 47 states.
Oh, wow. Well, more scare tactics. But it's interesting because this is a little bit of an older article here, but this is a Business Insider article mirrored on Yahoo Sports because COVID. The headline is, you aren't legally allowed to know which variant gave you COVID-19 in the U.S., even if it's Delta. This was published on August 23rd, but I think it's worth...
I thought this was bizarre. It's very interesting. And again, just for a little deconstruction, this is the headline. You aren't legally allowed to know which variant gave you COVID-19 in the U.S., even if it's Delta. as if Delta has like special rules applied to it. I don't know. I thought that was strange. But it does read like this. Sam Ryder, a musician from San Francisco, got a call from the California Department of Public Health in June. Though fully vaccinated, Ryder had recently tested positive for COVID-19 after teaching music at a summer camp. The health department asked him to take a second test at a local Kaiser Permanente. Reader or Ryder? What do you think? Ryder? Reader? Ryder.
I think Ryder.
Ryder's cooler. Ryder assumed it was because authorities wanted to find out whether he had a Delta infection. He too was curious, but when he got the test results back, he was surprised to learn that doctors couldn't give him any information about his variant. Quote, when I got the follow-up from Kaiser, they said it's positive, but they didn't have any of the sequencing information, Ryder told Insider. That felt odd to me, he said. Sounds like we're watching a man wake up right in front of our eyes. Several legal barriers prevented Ryder and his doctors, as well as nearly all Americans who have tested positive for the coronavirus, from knowing which variant was to blame. The Centers for Medical Care and Medicaid Service, which oversees the regulatory process for U.S. labs, requires genome sequencing tests to be federally approved before their results can be disclosed to doctors or patients. These are the tests that pick up on variants, but right now there's little incentive for the labs to do the work to validate those tests. And one might argue they are probably actively incentivized to not validate the tests, but that's what a crazy person would think. Quote, I don't think there's a lot of motivation, quite honestly, to get that done. Kelly Wroblewski, Director of Infectious Diseases at the Association of Public Health Laboratories, told Insider. Some patients, however, feel they're being denied access to their own health information. In some cases, knowing which variant is involved in an infection could inform how patients do their own contact tracing, since it informs how likely they are to have spread the virus to others. If it's a Delta infection, for instance, they may want to notify a much wider circle of family and friends. Other patients, like Ryan Forrest, a 30-year-old in Midland Park, New Jersey, are simply curious to figure out how they were infected. Forrest tested positive for COVID-19 after attending an indoor wedding in July. He said he didn't have any personal interactions with the wedding's patient zero, so he's still wondering how he got sick, especially since he was vaccinated in March. Knowing that the Delta variant infected him.
What are you reading?
Confusion. Quote, it would have been nice to know just for curiosity more than anything else, he said. Wroblewski said she totally understands that feeling. Quote, I would be curious. I think anybody would be curious, she said. The important thing to recognize is it's a liability for laboratories to release the information. So far, Wroblewski said more than 50 public labs in the U.S. are capable of sequencing coronavirus samples to detect the variants, but she's not aware of any labs that have completed the validation process to get federal approval. Quote, the process of validating a next-generation sequencing test is burdensome, Wroblewski said. Quote, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of data, it takes a lot of resources, and the thing about variants is that variants of concern and of interest are constantly changing. So you'd have to do a whole validation every time you have a variant. For a sequencing test to be validated, a manufacturer needs to collect data to show that the test does a good job of detecting a specific variant. Then request emergency authorization from the Food and Drug Administration. Alternatively, laboratories can validate their sequencing tests in-house, meaning they collect the same data, so CMS can approve their test. It actually doesn't sound that complicated, Gons. It sounds like you just do a good job on the test and then tell the FDA, but apparently that's too much for these companies.
You need the data.
The letter of the law from CMS is that if you don't go through this full validation process, you cannot release the results with patient identifying information. Wroblewski said one major exception, she noted, is if epidemiologists need to disclose a person's variant information over the course of contact tracing. Validating a test for a single variant could take weeks. Oh my gosh, weeks, Gons. To months, she added, quote, to keep up with it in real time when it doesn't influence a decision you're going to make on how you treat the patient just isn't very useful. Notice how they're just skipping over the big elephant in the room. Quote, it's satisfying curiosity more than it's really benefiting a patient. Oh, gosh, this is almost over, and then we're just going to dive right into the whole thing. There's too much to do it piece by piece. The main purpose of sequencing, Wroblewski said, is to detect new variants and understand whether they challenge the effectiveness of vaccines, treatments, or diagnostic tests. Down the line, she said, labs also hope to get better at understanding whether certain variants cause more severe outcomes in certain populations, such as pregnant women or the elderly. But right now, variants haven't fundamentally changed the way people protect themselves from COVID-19. Though the Delta variant is the most contagious version of the virus yet, masks and social distancing still reduce the spread. Notice how vaccines are not included on the lists of things that reduce the spread.
Next sentence, though.
And COVID-19 vaccines continue to offer good protection against severe disease and death. Again, vaccination not connected to the spread at all. Quote, at this point, unless we see something that truly is going to direct your therapeutic choice at an individual patient level, there's not a lot of benefit to a physician or a patient in knowing you have Delta, Wroblewski said. There's nothing differently that a physician is going to do than treat that patient. That makes it hard to justify the time and expense of validating a test, she added, particularly when those resources could be used to do more sequencing. Quote, if we see later there's going to be a true impact on a therapeutic that's used to treat SARS-CoV-2, then yes, we'll very likely change our approach, Wroblewski said. But at this moment, we're not there yet. Notice, Gons, how there's not a single reference, first of all, to these not just unapproved, but unvalidated sequencing tests. They're straight up unvalidated. And so you've got unapproved, unvalidated testing that apparently nobody's actually looking at the data because they have the data. The data's right there. But, oh, my gosh, to get it validated would just be so much work. But notice how they don't mention it's all about the patient. You know, you as an individual patient would not change your treatment or whatever just because of because of the variant. And yet, it is the conglomeration of these unapproved, unverified sequencing tests to detect variants that are the number one way that the media and politicians are using to justify the scare tactics, justify the continuous demonization of the unvaccinated, to justify propaganda and government lockdowns. It's all based on, well, it's the Delta variant, so we need to be more hardcore. You know, this is, yes, you might think this is tyranny. You might think these lockdowns or these whatevers are a little bit harsh or draconian, but it's because of the Delta variant that we have to do it. Delta variant, Delta, moo. And
see, it makes you sound like a cow. I think that's the whole point.
And yet, unvalidated, unapproved tests, it's just sort of whatever they say. And the patients are not allowed to know what's going on. Not only are they not allowed to know, they are legally prohibited from knowing which variant that they have. It smells pretty fishy to me, Gons.
Well, you kind of touched on the points I was going to make, was that every media outlet, all the government heads of whatever, health, or even the politicians or governors or whoever, they were using Delta to prolong whatever measures were needed, or quote unquote needed, or enforced. And for an article like this to just blatantly say, like, the labs can't share much, a lot of the testing is not verified or validated, it just goes to show that the facts don't matter at all at this point. It is an overreach of leaders in government. It's a totalitarian type of move, or if you want to call it whatever.
Remember the Economist article we read last episode talking about the only way to combat this misinformation is transparency from the government. The government doesn't even have transparency from these labs. It is completely shrouded in mystery where all these Delta variant numbers are coming from. Yeah. They take a random sampling of all the blah, 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 and they send it off to these labs. But what? Nobody's legally allowed to look at the data. Yeah, that's fine. We'll just trust them. We'll trust the big pharma medical lab companies and the government. We'll just trust them to make good decisions on our behalf, on behalf of the people, not, totally keep information secret and then just tell us to stay in our homes indefinitely.
Yep. Just trust the science.
Smells
you mean
fishy.
The scientists who wear white coats and act like they're authority.
The priests of scientism. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to think this smells fishy.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to, in the show notes for today's show, you have the, I placed the NIH source here from, and I'm sure people have shared this in the past, the ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. It's published back in June. The headline of this article is SARS-CoV-2 variants, spike mutations, and immune escape. And I thought it was interesting because in this little study here, and did we forward this? I don't remember if we did, but I have it here again just for, to show some of the inconsistencies here. In the abstract, it says the emergence of SARS-CoV-2 in late 2019 was followed by a period of relative evolutionary stasis lasting about 11 months. Since late 2020, however, SARS-CoV-2 evolution has been characterized by the emergence of sets of mutations in the context of variants of concern that impact virus characteristics, including transmissibility, the antigenicity, probably in response to the changing immune profile of the human population. What happened in late 2020? Do you remember what happened?
Late 2020 is when the Delta variant came. Oh, there's an election?
Yeah, but late December 2020, or November 2020 was when Pfizer and BioNTech requested emergency use authorization.
Yes.
And December was when they rolled out the vaccines. So literally, I don't know, they're not admitting it per se, but they're saying at the end of 2020 is when all these variants of concern started happening after 11 months of stasis.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Very interesting, right? The timing is uncanny.
That suspicious that we started getting variants right at the same time we started vaccinating everybody? And it's not... It doesn't have to be so deep as a big conspiracy theory that, there's variants in the vaccine or they're trying to make you get COVID from the vaccine. It's not about that. It's very simply that of what science has known through many pandemics, which is you don't start vaccinating during the pandemic, because that creates an atmosphere where the virus must adapt to the vaccines, and then you get vaccine-resistant viruses.
Specifically,
simple.
Specifically, it's the spike protein that's mutating. The virus itself, I don't know much about. I mean, this is just stuff I'm, as a podcaster, armchair guy on the internet, can surmise here. But it just seems like I don't know. We had that Salk study from April that said, hey, it's the spike proteins of the coronavirus that causes all these issues, inflammation, cardiac issues. And we have the variants all having to do with the spike protein mutating. It's like the virus doesn't even matter. I don't even think the virus is that deadly, or it can make you sick maybe, but it's really about the delivery system with the spike proteins. Yeah. And that's where all the variations are happening. So it's like,
which correlates directly with the fact that it would adapt to evade the vaccine.
Yes, exactly. 100%.
Right. The vaccine is to train your immune system. Not even train.
It's like inform. It's to program. Yeah.
It's to program your immune system to attack the spike protein, not the virus, the spike protein. Of course, the spike protein is going to be the thing that adapts to evade the variant or evade the vaccine. So many V words. And there you go. Straight from the NIH. I mean, again, you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist. You don't need to go on weird conspiracy blogs or alternative news sites, which we will do for fun. You don't need to do any of that. All you got to do is read the mainstream. They slip up, you make connections, and they tell you everything you need to know right there, available to everybody.
Well, speaking of which, oh boy. All right, I'll accept the cookies. Nature.com. Nature.com had a headline here. India's DNA COVID vaccine is a world first. More are coming.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun.
Scary. Mm-hmm. India, these pop-ups. India has approved a new COVID-19 vaccine that uses circular strands of DNA to prime the immune system against the virus SARS-CoV-2. Researchers have welcomed news of the first DNA vaccine for people to receive approval anywhere in the world and say many other DNA vaccines might soon be hot on its heels. ZyCoV-D, which is administered into the skin without an injection, has been found to be 67% protective against symptomatic COVID-19 in clinical trials and will probably start to be administered in India this month. Although the efficacy is not particularly high compared to that of many other COVID-19 vaccines, the fact that it is a DNA vaccine is significant, say researchers. It is proof of the principle that DNA vaccines...
No kidding. It is pretty significant, researchers.
It is proof of the principle that DNA vaccines work and can help in controlling the pandemic, says Peter Richmond, a pediatric immunologist at the University of Western Australia in Perth. Quote, "This is a really important step forward in the fight to defeat COVID-19 globally because it demonstrates that we have another class of vaccines that we can use."
You know, they say it right at the beginning of that article, of that paragraph. Mm-hmm. It is proof of the principle that DNA vaccines work. This is literally a proof of concept vaccine.
All of it. It's just, they're basically admitting that the human population right now is the lab rats, without really saying it outright.
Yep.
Close to a dozen DNA vaccines against COVID-19 are in clinical trials globally, and at least as many again are in earlier stages of development. DNA vaccines are also being developed for many other diseases. Quote, "If DNA vaccines prove to be successful, this is really the future of vaccinology because they are easy to manufacture," says Shahid Jamil, a virologist at Ashoka University in Sinopat, India. The urgency of combating COVID-19 has fast-tracked the development of vaccines that use genetic technology, such as messenger RNA and DNA vaccines, says David Weiner, director of the Vaccine and Immunotherapy Center at the Worcester University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. RNA vaccines were quicker to show strong immune response in clinical trials. They have now been delivered to hundreds of millions of people around the world. But DNA vaccines have a number of benefits because they are easy to produce, and the finished products are more stable than mRNA vaccines, which typically require storage at very low temperatures.
Yeah,
they're more stable than mRNA vaccines. This is kind of admitting.
For the first month of the vaccines, they said, "Oh, we got to keep it in super cold freezers." That went away in about 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, when people were busting out vaccines in coolers.
Right.
Yeah. ZyCoV-D was developed by Indian pharmaceutical firm Zydus Cadila, headquartered in Ahmedabad. On 20 August, India's drug regulator authorized the vaccine for people aged 12 and older. The efficacy figure of 67% came from trials involving more than 28,000 participants, which saw 21 symptomatic cases of COVID-19 in the vaccinated group and 60 among those who received a placebo. Zy-CoV-D contains circular strands of DNA known as plasmids, which encode the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, together with the promoter sequence for turning the gene on. Once the plasmids enter the nuclei of cells, they are converted into mRNA, which travels to the main body of the cell, the cytoplasm, and is translated into the spike protein itself.
There it is.
Yeah. The body's immune system then mounts a response against the protein and produces tailored immune cells that can clear future infections. Plasmids typically degrade within weeks to months, but the immunity remains. Both DNA and mRNA vaccines have been under development since the 1990s, says Weiner. The challenge for DNA vaccines is that they need to make it all the way to the cell nucleus, unlike mRNA vaccines, which just need to get to the cytoplasm, says Jamil. For a long time, DNA vaccines struggled to induce potent immune responses in clinical trials, which is why they had been approved for use as vaccines only in animals, such as horses, until now.
It's a horse vaccine.
It's a horse vaccine.
Oh, my gosh. Get these crazy Joe Schmogans out of here.
Oh, I should have that Joe Schmogan thing ready. Hold on. My board is all messed up today, but I do think I have the Joe Schmogan.
I think you got it ready for us, Gons. You're the best. You're the best there is. That's because you have the jingles at your fingertips.
Yeah. Oh, I messed it up.
And I'm still stalling.
I messed it up. It's not labeled correctly, I don't think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, too bad.
Sorry, no. All you listeners were eagerly waiting.
Wow,
on
really
Joe Schmogan.
The anticipation.
I know. I feel bad
control.
Now. What is it labeled? It's not labeled properly. Is it Iphelia? Is it ivermectin? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just gonna.
Ivermectin works. Get the ivermectin one.
Oh wait, what happened to it?
Oh my!
What is going on?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's my failure as a podcaster right there.
That would have been a good time to hit the gotta find the jingle as
I know.
well.
Here's ivermectin.
Ivermectin. I got COVID. Ivermectin. All kinds of meds. Ivermectin. Everything. Ivermectin. Boom, he took ivermectin.
Joe Schmogan, infamous horse person.
Alex Jones, did you see him? We don't have it for today's show, but it kind of went viral. That's why I kind of just ignored it.
Take ivermectin live on the air.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Cool.
Chomping it down. So anyway, this vaccine allegedly does not need an injection. It just needs to get under the skin, as opposed to
you kind of just
muscle.
put it on the top of your skin, and then your body kind of sucks it in.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got all the relevant points there. Now, this is obviously a little more concerning, as it is a full-on DNA vaccine and not just an mRNA vaccine. I mean, I don't know. It almost doesn't even feel like we need to get into how problematic that is.
Yeah, well, I'm not understanding all the nuance of the science. I'm not going to comment on whether it changes your DNA or not, but at the very least, it doesn't sound, if you want to feed the skeptics, and especially the vaccines change your DNA crowd, with any kind of thing there, you come out with the headline that says a DNA vaccine is here. Yeah. And it works kind of, not as well. But
I mean, the one of the other concerning parts about this is they said, what was it, a dozen other DNA vaccines are being tested right now, and it's the future of vaccinology. So they'll start using them for everything. But also, immunity as a service.
Immunity as a service. One of the concerns people were having was like, is there the vaccine shedding that happens with the mRNA vaccines? If this is like a cream that you put on your skin or something, the shedding might be more intense. You put it on your hands or whatever. I don't know how it's administered. It's just under the skin.
Well, there's some sort of precedent. Again, I don't know. This is very new to us, and we'll need to talk to our medical experts to gain some more understanding. But, the cream thing is kind of, if it is a cream, it is concerning because there are other creams that, like, do basically shed and transfer onto other people. Like, you remember that testosterone cream thing? Men were getting testosterone
they were testing positive
therapy.
and stuff. Yeah.
Well, they were, instead of injecting testosterone for those who are getting testosterone therapy, like you become a man of a certain age. What is it called? Hormone replacement therapy. I forget. Whatever it's called. Well, they started doing this in a cream where you just rub this testosterone cream and it soaks in through your skin. But problem is, when these dads were putting on their testosterone cream and then like hugging their children or kissing their wife, it was transferring the testosterone to their children and their wives. Caused a lot of trouble. I mean,
Nephilim family.
Yeah.
That's a good plot line for the Nephilim family, sitcom there. I guess they already kind of have stuff like that, but anyway.
Yeah, well, so there's your narrative A, folks. It's so fun how even while investigating the mainstream narrative A, the scaremongers,
it's kind of crumbling. Some of it.
It destroys itself.
Yeah.
And again, all you got to do is compare the information against itself, against the science, and it starts to crumble on its own. But let's move into narrative B, as we've been exploring how the mainstream narrative is starting to make space for the idea that maybe a lot of this was an overreaction or things are changing and it's not as, it's not as straightforward, at least, as we've been led to believe. Let's go to this story from CBS 58.
It's actually a CNN article that was mirrored here, I think, or just relayed through this affiliate.
Yeah, it is a CNN mirror, but it's on CBS58.com. It's by CNN. The headline, more than 80%... that actually is a good point. This is a CNN article being mirrored on CBS. So keep that in mind. It makes it even more interesting. More than 80% of Americans 16 and older have some immunity to coronavirus.
Oh, we have herd immunity.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Didn't Fauci say 70%?
He later changed it to 90, but 80s. He also said 80 at some point.
He changed the dater.
The dater.
We can't trust his dater. Let me finish the headline. More than 80% of Americans 16 and older have some immunity to coronavirus. Blood survey finds. Spooky. We're moving into spooky season, folks. It's blood survey.
Blood survey. Let me taste your blood. 80% clear.
More than 80% of Americans 16 and older have some level of immunity against the coronavirus, mostly through vaccination. Mostly,
yeah.
A survey of blood donations indicates. The survey led by I thought you weren't allowed to donate blood if you're vaccinated.
I think it depends on where.
Oh, the plasma. I think you're not allowed to donate plasma. I forget. The survey, led by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also indicates that about twice as many people that have been infected with the virus as have been officially counted. Well, the survey, led by the U.S. Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, also indicates that about twice as many people have been infected with the virus as have been officially counted.
that gives away so much.
Seems like a small thing.
No,
and
it's
immediately you might say, oh, weird. Oh, they're trying to boost the numbers of the count. But the fatality rate is already under 1%.
Very low. Yeah.
If you double the amount of people, that makes the fatality rate like 0.05% or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the latest the case count in America here. I'll look for it. Keep going.
I mean, that makes it the entire population of the U.S. probably.
That's what I'm saying. We have herd immunity.
Yeah. More than 39 million Americans have been diagnosed with coronavirus infection since the pandemic started in 2020.
Yeah, I'm saying 40 million. 40 million, so let's call it 80 million.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could run the quick math on that, on the current fatality rate. Again, given the flaws in the counting of numbers.
Yeah, I'll round up to 650,000 deaths and divide it by, what is it, 80 million?
80 million, yeah.
The answer is 0.8125%. So it puts it at under 1%.
Under 1% still. Yeah. More than 39 million Americans have been diagnosed with coronavirus infection since the pandemic started in 2020. The team, led by the CDC's Dr. Jefferson Jones, set out to determine how close the U.S. might be to some kind of herd immunity, although they do not claim to have any kind of handle on that yet.
They're good at dancing.
I mean, you've got the numbers. You're saying 80% of Americans have
immunity. 80% of people over 18. That's their little
16.
caveat. Was it 16?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 16,
they worked with 17 blood collection organizations working in all 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico to test blood covering 74% of the population. In the end, they tested about 1.4 million samples. In July 2020, before any vaccine was available, 3.5% of samples carried antibodies to SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. That rose to 11.5% by December. They reported in the medical journal JAMA. By May, 83.3% of samples had antibodies to the virus, most of them from vaccination.
33.
You know what's weird? We've seen in previous reports that those who have been vaccinated, was it the antigen or an antibody test? I forget. There was something about how, oh no, you can't actually see the immunity in a vaccinated person.
That was a while. Yeah, that was a while ago, I think.
Okay. Well, I'm coming off the top of my head there, but we might look into that in the future. But anywho, 83.3% of samples had antibodies to the virus, most of them from vaccination. And while in July 2020, blood surveillance. Oh,
you know what it was? I remember it now. I remember now. It's the FDA here. The FDA recommended, this is back in May, the headline in the FDA.gov website here, antibody testing is not currently recommended to assess immunity after COVID-19 vaccination. FDA safety communication. Don't do it. Don't take an antibody test after a vaccine. It'll prove that we have herd immunity. We cannot let such information be public.
That's a good point.
That's funny. Okay, go on.
And while in July 2020, blood surveillance indicated the U.S. was only counting one infection out of every 3 true infections that fell to 1 and 2 a year later. This was all pre-Delta, the researchers cautioned. Plus, they didn't measure the other part of the human response, one involving cells known as T cells, and one that might induce broader immunity. But knowing who has antibodies can help inform public health efforts. Quote, several large studies have shown that among individuals who are seropositive from prior SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19 incidence is reduced by 80 to 95%. So they're saying 83.3% of Americans are 80 to 95% immune already. Similar to vaccine efficacy statements. So right there you go. Similar to vaccine efficacy statements. Even if you haven't had the vaccine, if you have natural immunity, you have similar to vaccine efficacy. Quote, the study will, which is opposite of what Fauci keeps saying, opposite of what Director of Doom, Rochelle keeps saying. Quote, the study will continue until at least December 2021, and results will be made available on the CDC's website, they wrote. Yeah, we'll see about that. COVID-19 hospitalizations in the U.S. have been rising, blah, blah, blah. I think they just get into the story there.
The thing that you have to keep in mind here, too, is the totalitarian scientific dictatorship takeover, technocracy, all that stuff. It doesn't matter what the facts are at this point. And I say that because, well, we've noticed it over the course of analyzing all these stories. But I'm reminded in my little memory bank, just a few weeks ago, we reported on a microchip that would detect antibodies in your body. So it's like, oh, we need all this tracing and all this stuff for either the virus or, to see if you've been vaccinated. But then on the flip side, it's, we need a microchip to see, where your antibodies are at. So even if this narrative comes out and it's like, hey, we have herd immunity. Well, how do we prove it? Oh, we must put a microchip in you to make sure that there is enough antibodies in your system so that you're safe. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. Like, the tactics don't matter. The goal remains the same with all of the invasive tech that they're rolling out.
Bro, and I'm telling you, everybody out there, when you're having conversations with your friend and your family, and they're all freaked out about how everybody's going to die from COVID, you need to join the mailing list, because we send out these show notes every single week. And yeah, you can bust this out. It's a CNN article saying we've hit 83.3% immunity. There's no need for all this nonsense.
But there is, because at the very end, oh man, I should have highlighted it. I think they still do the whole but
of course they do.
Get the vaccine. It's still the best way.
Get your vaccine. You're a dirty, filthy animal if you're unvaccinated. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, but it's interesting that they have to kind of roll out some of this narrative to shift things around. I mean, the part that I'm thinking is going to be strange is, I suppose the majority of people who have been vaccinated and all this stuff, they're just going to kind of carry on. But how many are going to be mad and just never trust any government or any political authority ever again because of just the nonsense? Or are they just going to buy whatever is spoon-fed to them at the moment? It's got to be a certain percentage that says like, hey, what the heck, people?
Yeah.
And I say that because I have this, just as a side note here, it was an article that was published in March in Nature, a couple Nature articles. The headline is 5 reasons why COVID herd immunity is probably impossible. It's probably impossible. And
do they list it's probably impossible because we vaccinated too soon and the virus was given a chance to adapt?
Not
to
really.
The vaccine?
They do a lot of dancing around different things. Just a couple highlights that I have here. Most estimates had placed the threshold at 60 to 70% of the population gaining immunity, either through vaccination or past exposure to the virus. But as the pandemic enters its second year, the thinking has begun to shift. In February, independent data scientist Youyang Gu changed the name of his popular COVID-19 forecasting model from Path to Herd Immunity to Path to Herd Immunity to Path to Normality. Ooh. He said that reaching a herd immunity threshold was looking unlikely because of factors such as vaccine hesitancy, the emergence of new variants, and the delayed arrival of vaccinations for children. It all seems very momentary, right? And then it's unclear whether vaccines prevent transmission. That poses another problem for herd immunity.
It's not unclear anymore.
It's not. The vaccine's ability to block transmission doesn't need to be 100% to make a difference. Even 70% effectiveness would be, quote, amazing, says Samuel Scarpino, a network scientist, because we trust network scientists to tell us about infectious disease. Well, I guess he studies infectious diseases at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, but there could still be a substantial amount of virus spread that can make it a lot harder to break transmission chains. And then one more here. If it's not possible to vaccinate children, many more adults would need to be immunized to achieve herd immunity, Bansal said. Bansal, I think, is the head guy for Moderna, or the CEO of Moderna, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so. That's Bourla.
Was it? Are you sure?
Yeah. Bourla is the current CEO of Pfizer's name.
Hold on. Oh, you're right. Bansal was the mathematical biologist at Georgetown University. Okay. And so, yes, Bansal says those aged 16 and older can receive the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, but other vaccines are approved only for 18 and up. In the U.S., for example, 24% are under 18 years old, according to the 2010 census. If most under 18 can't receive the vaccination, 100% of over 18 will have to get vaccinated to reach 86% immunity in the population.
Yeah. Well, we've hit 83%.
For 18 and older, yeah.
Yeah, 16
or 16
and older.
Yeah, I keep saying 18 and older, sorry. And at the bottom here, it's time for more realistic expectations. The vaccine is, quote, an absolutely astonishing development, but it's unlikely to completely halt the spread. So we need to think of how we can live with the virus, Flange said. So, I mean, this was the sentiment.
I mean, he's not wrong.
4 or 5 months ago. Yeah, he's not wrong, but it's also
not wrong. We've been saying that since the beginning. It's going to be here. That's what happens. You're not going to totally kill it. And this narrative where you're getting people all worked up at the possibility of eradicating the virus is
this unrealistic
impossible.
expectation.
And it's unrealistic. It's never been done before, even with things like smallpox, and polio, where it's like everybody gets vaccinated against these things. We defeated smallpox. Okay, well, whoopsie daisies. It just keeps popping up out of nowhere once in a while. You get these little smallpox things. These little polio outbreaks, it just happens. You never can fully get rid of something.
Yep. And along those lines here, I have an article from globes.co.il. This is an Israeli news outlet. And the headline here, the man making antibodies smarter. I had to double check because I thought it might have been like a parody or like a satire thing, but it's not.
Yeah.
Says here that Professor Yanné Olfran's amazing story about the pursuit of an antibody that will save the world from disease. Shlomit Lan and Gali Weinbred University Yanné Olfran, founder and CEO of Biologic Design, a company that develops smart antibodies designed to treat a variety of diseases, is frustrated. Quote, humanity invests $300 billion each year in drug development, and what do we get? At most, a few dozen medications a year, most of which don't solve the problems, and give an additional 3 weeks of life on average to patients with pancreatic cancer, or manage to inject a medication that, to date, was given via infusion. Those are the breakthroughs, he says despairingly. But Olfran does not think the pharmaceutical companies are the only culprit.
This poor guy.
I know.
This poor guy thinks that, like, we've spent so much money, why can't we cure the diseases? Well, because the companies spending all the money want to make their money back.
Yes.
You don't make money by curing diseases.
But Olfran does not think the pharmaceutical companies are the only culprit. Quote, the drug companies are portrayed as a devil who says, I won't cure this because it's not worth my time. But these companies do have a legal obligation towards their shareholders not to develop drugs unless there's an economic incentive. That's what he says there. The problem, as analyzed by Olfran, is much more complicated and therefore far more difficult to treat. Quote, there are 3 players sitting around the drug development table: science, regulation, and the business world. Everyone knows the whole thing is in a jam, but if you ask one player why that is, they'll point to the other 2 and say, because of them. Scientists say business people only go where the money is, and regulators act as if everyone wants to cheat them, and they're both right. Regulators and business people claim that scientists come up with solutions that are bad and can't be implemented in terms of either regulation or business. How can we progress? We need better business models for drug development. So how can we achieve better results? Quote, drug development costs must be reduced. Blah, blah, blah. Goes into some info here. He says the problem is not just regulatory when the cost of developing a new drug is $1 billion and the drug company has to decide which of 2 drugs to trial. It will go with the one that worked in animal trials, and testing drugs on animals is a mistake. It doesn't work. Scientifically, it's stupid. There's an old joke about a conference on cancer where the speaker says he's got great news for all the mice in the audience. Little scientist insider joke, I guess. And then, once again, there's a headline, cure for cancer found, but in fact, there's no cure. Quote, in the end, we will actually solve cancer because we know what causes it, but when we solve one problem, we replace it with another. Olfran naturally believes he has a better solution. Under his management, Biologic Design has developed a technology for developing and programming antibodies using computational mathematics, big data, and artificial intelligence. Unlike the usual antibodies serving the pharmaceutical industry, the promise is smart antibodies, a sort of nanobot that, like human antibodies, is able to adapt to change situations. Quote, in 2 or 3 months, we're going to inject the first computer-designed antibody in history into a human, he announces jubilantly.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Jubilantly.
We will inject humans with... Okay, so I find this interesting because as we talk about narrative B and the ship turning around, it's not all fun and games. It's not all vindication for people who have been skeptical of the main narrative. And that's kind of what we've been warning against this whole time, is that once they turn the ship, what is the agenda now? What are they trying to push now? And I think this is a good example of that whole thing, because here's a guy who's clearly calling out the medical industry, the scientific dictatorship, and in good detail. You know, he's talking about the financial incentive, the business incentive, and how they put science aside for profit and all this kind of stuff. But then his solution is injecting the first computer-designed antibodies, and he calls them a sort of nanobot. And to my understanding, there aren't like legit nanobots yet. That's kind of a misnomer that they have nanobots the way we think of them, in or at least have been portrayed in science fiction. We have, what are they called? They're like nano, self-propelled nano motors and other biodegradable nano devices made of bio-nano components, which can carry drugs to certain cells in your body and stuff like that. But we don't have these like nanobots as we've seen in science fiction.
Not as you see, yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's kind of a misnomer and a little bit misleading. But I just think it's weird that, with all this antibody talk, we have the detection of antibodies with the microchip, and then now we have injectable computer-designed antibodies that this guy is so jubilantly excited for.
Yeah.
Just, keeping our eyes on, and especially Israel being obviously ground zero for a lot of mishaps with the vaccine. It's almost like people will be begging for a smart antibody in their bodies because, hey, the vaccine didn't work. It wore off too quickly. Give me those little nanobots.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, it's just so funny because it's like anybody up until this point who said, oh, this is going to be the reason to introduce the chip. This is going to be the reason to introduce nanobots and transhumanist immunity goals. Ah, that's crazy. You're just a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yes and no. You know what I mean? Like, you're right, but you were wrong about maybe the details, but you're right about the overall sentiment of what's happening. And I think it's like with anything, with a lot of things we look at on this show, is that there's like a nugget of truth within it, but then you either get the people who completely dismiss everything, they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they go with the mainstream narrative, or they take the nugget of truth and they swallow the entire narrative pill of all this other stuff that goes along with it. And that kind of leads to a misleading of some of the fear-mongering propaganda on the other side of the aisle. And speaking of which, do you want to tackle this article from your favorite alternative news source?
Oh, please. Oh, please. Yeah. What, you want to do a little debunker bunker?
Kind of, because, well, yes, but also give credit where credit is due on certain sentiments here, but for the most part, yeah, it's a kind of a...
Okay, I'll start us out, and I'll let you take us where you want to go.
Sure.
This is coming from naturalnews.com, the worst website on the internet. I know some people are very excited about Natural News, but they really are sort of a disgusting abuse of clickbait and nonsense. I'm looking here.
Read the tags on this too, by the way, not just the headline.
Okay, yeah, here we go. The headline is, "Are COVID vaccines part of the mark of the beast system?" Tags are Antichrist, bad health, bioweapons, COVID, dehumanize, demonic, evil, genocide, masks, plandemic, Satanism, slaughter, twisted, vaccine wars, vaccines.
I think my favorite is just slaughter. What other articles have slaughter or talk about slaughter on this website? Just a whole tag. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Okay, it reads like this. Remember when the government promised that it would take just 2 weeks of tyranny to flatten the curve, only to instead have it persist in perpetuity for the rest of the foreseeable future? This writer sure does. What was supposed to just be a temporary inconvenience to help save lives has become a permanent albatross of dehumanization and soon slaughter. I missed a comma, I think. Soon slaughter, as the goats of this world line themselves up for injection after injection with no end in sight.
Do you disagree with that so far?
No.
Okay, let's keep going.
I mean, I disagree of it being like presented
the way it's being presented. Yeah,
a news source. Yeah, if you refuse to wear a mask when you are killing grandma,
then you are killing grandma.
Oh, then you are killing grandma. If you refuse to get vaccinated, then you only care about yourself and need to be punished as a second-class citizen. If you do anything to try to live a normal life outside the bounds of government guidelines, then you deserve to be exterminated, is where all of this is headed. I'd say we're pretty much already there. None of this was ever really about saving lives, of course. It is plain to see that those who orchestrated this psychological campaign of mass genocide could not care less about your life or anyone else's, and are actually seeking to destroy it at warp speed. Dun dun dun! Whoa, a little jab at Trump there.
Jab at Trump, I know. This is the disenfranchisement of the Trump people. It's interesting.
Only the dullest of minds could ever possibly think otherwise. Based on all that is transpiring day after day is the dystopian nightmare called life in 2021.
This is part of the problem with articles like this is just like the sweeping generalized insults. Both sides do it. CNN will do it too.
Right.
But places like Natural News are a little bit more, I don't know. They're less subtle about it.
Yeah, I hope you have a plan for this, Gons. 2020 was bad enough, and soon the world will have to contend with 2022 and whatever that should bring to the table. Are COVID vaccines the first piece of the mark of the beast? The first piece of the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
Interesting way for them to bring that up. The writing is already on the wall for mandatory injection policies as the nation's more progressive areas gradually adopt vaccine passport protocols designed to ostracize those who refuse to get the jab. It begins with non-essentials like restaurants and sporting events, things people can live without, even if life becomes a whole lot less exciting in the process. Eventually, necessities like groceries and employment become condition based on one's jab status. Yet, many seem to recall certain passages from the Bible that foretold about this time. There will come a day, the passages read, when in order to buy and sell, one must take a mark. Without that mark, you can kiss your life and freedom goodbye. We are already...
I was going to say, I don't remember the passage in Revelation 13 talking about kissing your life and freedom goodbye. But interesting interpretation of that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, yeah, I was going to say the beheadings, but the beheadings are...
that's what I'm saying. Like,
the beheadings are more if you refuse to worship the beast.
Part of the worship, the mark comes after the worship of the beast or the image of the beast. So, yeah.
Interesting. We are already witnessing the early stages of this prophecy come to fulfillment. The things people do, the right hand, and think the forehead. Oh, wow. They're getting pretty a little metaphorical.
Yes, this is actually this is an interpretation of Revelation 13 often cited by Seventh-day Adventists. They have used the allegorical treatment of this passage, saying that the right hand has to do with what people do and the forehead has to do with what people think or worship. So,
interesting.
Yes.
We are already witnessing the early stages of this prophecy come to fulfillment. The things people do, the right hand, and think, the forehead, are rapidly becoming conditional upon obeying the government's orders. In this case, with a questionable injection that we know permanently alters one's DNA. Oh, or God imprint. Okay, I mean...
Well, the other point to make on the SDA, the Seventh-day Adventists, in Africa, they actually endorsed the COVID-19 vaccine.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, weird. But go ahead.
Yeah. And also,
I'm so happy that you are so sad about reading this article.
I mean, it's not that crazy, actually. I mean, they're getting some things a little tweaked, but some would argue that this injection is not yet the mark. Oh, I would argue that. But consider the fact that science has become the world's new and only accepted religion, with COVID vaccines as a sacrament. Well, I can agree with that. The beast system that is pushing these injections, meanwhile, demands that you give it the utmost worth or worship to the point that you lay down your life, change your DNA as a sacrifice to show that you are an adherent.
Yeah.
This is interesting. I don't think you need to get so allegorical with it. I'm not sure if it helps the case, in my opinion. Give it the utmost worship to the point that you lay down your life. Change your DNA.
Yeah, it doesn't have to. Even if it doesn't change your DNA, it could kill you. So
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it is a little interesting. I'm hesitant to say that this is sort of like a dangerous way to look at it allegorically, because certainly things are sometimes written on purpose to be allegorical, but this does sort of take away from the legitimacy of a possible literal interpretation of laying down your life, by sort of devaluing that to the point of, changing your DNA. But they're both a big deal. Whoever refuses to worship the beast system by rolling up their sleeve is quickly becoming an outcast or someone who has, quote, come out from among her rather than convert. While there are certainly more pieces to come as far as the mark is concerned, the injections are laying the groundwork for them. Yeah. You might even call it an operating system upon which later software upgrades will be injected, aka the booster shots. Consider all this before simply discounting the idea because your favorite preacher or news source says otherwise. There are no second chances. It's funny. This is coming from a quote-unquote news source. Yeah. Consider this before simply discounting the idea because your favorite preacher or news source says otherwise. There are no second chances when it comes to this stuff, so you'd better be sure you are not mistaken. I think the thing that bugs me about this, because I think there's a lot in here that is not necessarily something that we would argue against. It feels like the writer of this article is choosing to make things allegorical in order to fit the vaccine as the mark of the beast, which you see a lot in the mark of the beast vaccine arguments. Is you have to choose to take certain things allegorical and other things literal in order to fit the puzzle piece with the vaccine. Yeah.
So when I read through this, I also expected it to be just a glaring problem, right?
I thought so too. It was a lot less problematic than I expected.
But I think the reason why they're sort of moving in this direction, or that crowd, is because it's not rolling out exactly how they had. Some, not they, but it's like some people.
I don't know. Natural News had some pretty egregious.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. Natural News being one of those people that was literally, this is the mark, this is it.
This is actually a toned down version of some
they
of
are turning their own little ship. They're noticing the big ship turning, and they're like, "Oh no, we better turn around too."
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Okay, I see why you put this in.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to just make you suffer through reading a Natural News article on this show. There was a purpose for it because the conversation is still out there, and I think it's important for people to be objective and clarify the concerns with the vaccines and the mandates and everything else associated, the passports. And, if you're going to bring up the mark of the beast, you can bring up how it's kind of like the mark of the beast, or how these parts of the mark of the beast seem to be kind of like what they're doing with the vaccine. But you got to be clear that, if you say that this is it, I mean, you're skipping a lot of verses to get there. There's a lot of things that haven't happened yet that lead to that point, and then you have to allegorize and justify
a lot of really important.
You got to
details.
justify all kinds of stuff that have already happened as this is it. This verse fulfills this and all that, and people have been doing that for centuries. So I think
I was going to mention, I mean, just for those who might not have heard this before, I grew up in a tradition of Christianity where we are constantly, looking at the revelation, and comparing it to current events. I mean, the mark of the beast has been, and I say this sort of tongue in cheek, the mark of the beast has appeared like a dozen times in my lifetime.
Yeah.
First it's RFID chip. First it was a barcode. Then it was RFID chips. Then it was this. Then it was that. And it all, when you pick and choose which things to make allegorical and which things to take literally and which things to straight up skip, you can fit pretty much anything into the mark of the beast roadmap.
Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that the spirit of Antichrist is not involved in a lot of these things. I most certainly think it is.
Certainly is, and that's another way that
nuance.
That gets dropped is that there's a lot of talk about the Antichrist, not a lot of talk about the spirit of Antichrist.
Yeah, which has been at work since the beginning.
Yeah,
as,
well,
First
this
John
is interesting.
Says.
Yeah, this is sort of a first identification from the turning of the ship in narrative B, sort of like coming around. The opposite direction as the mainstream.
And I don't think people, and on this show we've been, again, I'm gonna bring up the antibody stuff, but the antibody detection being part of a microchip in your body type of system that kind of flips everything on its head. Well, no, it wasn't the vaccine, it's this antibody testing chip. It's gonna keep progressing. Eventually, sure, it's going to get to that point where you can't buy or sell unless you have the mark. The scriptures here, I'm looking at verse 17. No one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. Mm-hmm. And so it's the name of the beast or the number of its name. It's very straightforward unless you want to allegorize that too. And here's a call to wisdom. Let one who has the insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And the number is 666.
Yeah.
The number of a man.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Unless you had, you can kind of extract 666 out of Fauci and you slap a Fauci jab on your forehead or something like that. You know what I mean? There's a little bit more to it than just it's a vaccine just randomly. It could be Pfizer, it could be Moderna. Doesn't matter. It's a vaccine.
Unless you choose to allegorize all those details.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is an ongoing thing. I'm not saying that we have it all figured out. We're not saying that it's not either. You know what I mean? There's certainly a possibility that this can get real bad in a couple of years, a few months, and boom, here it is. And Lord, come quickly either way. But I just think it's important to have a level-headed approach to this stuff on both sides, because obviously it's easy to tear down the mainstream narrative just because they're so inconsistent. It's a little bit harder and sometimes uncomfortable to analyze your own crowd, so to speak, of their narratives and be objective about that. It's not popular, but I think it's important, because otherwise you're just going to freak people out and you're going to mislead them, and you may even mislead people who may have otherwise come to the Lord or turned around on their views, normies in the mainstream, whatever. They might be turned off by this crazy fear mongering that happens.
Exactly. It can turn into the same fear mongering control mechanism that you see from the mainstream.
Right. So there you go. Okay. I don't know, how much do you want to spend time, because we're kind of out of time for today. Yeah, we've gone an hour, close to an hour and a half.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But we did have a couple Afghanistan things. We can mention it briefly. We don't have to go deep.
I think we can just breeze through them.
Okay.
Let's talk about politic real quick.
It's Latin for many. Now suck your blood. Now suck
Politics.
your blood.
This is interesting. This is coming from FoxNews.com. The headline, State Department blocking private rescue flights from leaving Afghanistan. Organizers say blood is on their hands. Yeah, so we have been in contact with some people who are organizing these private rescue flights to go try to pick up some people in Afghanistan. But seems like the government is making that a little difficult for them. Interesting. Americans engaged in the rescue of U.S. citizens, SIVs, and green card holders left behind by President Biden in Afghanistan are horrified by what they describe as inexplicable delays from the State Department that are preventing evacuation flights from leaving the country. The State Department's delays are recklessly endangering American lives. 3 different individuals involved in the private evacuation effort told Fox News. Rick Clay, who runs the private rescue group Plan B.
Why are you confused?
Interesting choice of name.
Yeah.
Plan B, like the birth
the crypto?
control.
Oh.
No, the crypto. My gosh.
The crypto guy, the stop the flow guy. His name is Plan B, right?
Yeah, okay. Not the first place my mind went, but Rick Clay, who runs the private rescue group Plan B, told Fox News that the State Department is the only thing preventing the flights he's organizing from leaving Afghanistan. 2 other American individuals separately involved in evacuation efforts, whom Fox News is not naming to avoid jeopardizing ongoing rescue efforts, similarly said that the State Department is the sole entity preventing the charter flights from leaving Afghanistan. Quote, "This is zero place to be negotiating with American lives. Those are people standing at the tarmac, and all it takes is a effing phone call." One of those individuals who has been integral in private evacuation efforts from Afghanistan told Fox News. Quote, "If one life is lost as a result of this, the blood is on the White House's hands. The blood is on their hands," that individual said, adding, quote, "It is not the Taliban that is holding this up. As much as it sickens me to say it, it is the United States government." That individual suggested that the State Department's obstruction is motivated in part by embarrassment that private individuals are rescuing Americans whom the U.S. government left behind. Those seeking clearance to land in Qatar are informed by military channels that they must first go through State Department to gain approval, an email reviewed by Fox News shows. Clay has a manifest of 4,500 names of U.S. citizens, green card holders, SIVs, and refugees trying to get stateside. So far, they've given the State Department 800 names for a first round of flights. Fox News has reviewed that manifest, which confirms Clay's account. Quote, "It is impressive that we get to Doha. Imperative that we get to Doha, where there are other refugee centers. Plan B founder told Fox News in a text message. That's what I've been asked for clearance." And it goes on and on. It's a rather long article. But, you know, it begs the question, Gons, what is the motivation for the U.S. government wanting to keep American citizens in Afghanistan? There's a couple of angles to it. One of them is embarrassment, but I don't think that's it. I mean, surely that's part of it, and surely they are and should be embarrassed about the Afghanistan thing.
Well, maybe go ahead. What was the other one?
The other one, there's 2 more, and I'll go through quickly because I want to know what you think about them. The second one is, you know, sort of a general partisan which doesn't make too much sense because it's the White House, but a general sort of political idea of not wanting to let immigrants into the United States, or at least have some sort of control over who you don't want let any terrorists slip through the cracks or whatever. But that's mainly built on propaganda as well. It makes me wonder why they would want to keep U.S. citizens on the ground in Afghanistan. And it makes me think, if they create a situation that keeps U.S. citizens on the ground in Afghanistan, it keeps U.S. interests focused on Afghanistan. You know, you sort of have a political reason to not fully get out of Afghanistan, or to keep some sort of operation, or to justify more bombings or drone strikes, or it feels like these U.S. citizens, etc., are purposefully being kept in Afghanistan as some sort of bargaining chip for something. I just don't know what it is.
Well, it could be from the perspective of Biden, his plan.
We will hunt you down and make you pay.
Can't hunt him down if they're all out of the country.
Yeah. Well, right. If they don't have any victims in harm's way, then it's difficult to justify killing Afghani babies.
Yeah. So you got that angle. Also, I was listening to No Agenda, their kind of breakdown of Afghanistan and everything, and they brought up China, which, by the way, we called that. Not that we're the first ones to call it, but we did point it out very early while everybody else was complaining about the extraction. We were like, this probably has something to do with China. They have a little different angle on it. But they did mention, Adam Curry did mention something that hadn't crossed my mind, which was, what if this was Trump's move here?
Oh, please.
Like he had some move, connected to the Taliban. He's like, got to take out Biden. Why don't let's do the extraction. Let's make it let's make it ugly. It's just
I guess. I don't know. I'm gonna push back against the Trump
I know, but it's a fun
won't.
thing that hadn't crossed my mind. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, first off, this contact in the Fox article here sounds like our contact, because the conversation I had with him last week. He said the same thing. He's like, the U.S. isn't helping us.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure this out on our own. But it's even worse that they're basically blocking their ability to get out, which is horrible.
Yeah, an active sort of sabotage.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's all messy, and there's so much going on that we can't see. It's hard to really come up with an objective, analytical thing here.
I think they want to keep U.S. citizens there. I think it's part of the perpetual state of crisis that they have to keep it in.
Yeah.
You can't actually solve a problem. There always has to be some sort of next crisis, similar to the variants of COVID and the continuing crisis creation revolving that. I think that they want to keep citizens there. First of all, to just keep an ambient sense of crisis surrounding Afghanistan.
Yeah. Keep the ongoing war just going a little bit longer.
Which will justify something, some sort of involvement, because without citizens in Afghanistan, it's really hard to justify
any kind of military,
anything at all going on over there. If there was no U.S. citizens, the idea would be, hey, wash your hands, walk away, get out of there. Which of course they don't want to do. They want to keep influence and some sort of operations there. And I think they can only justify it to the public if there are U.S. citizens there. I mean, it may. Yeah. I think it's more complicated than that, but I think that's a start.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense in the grander scheme of the agenda here.
Yeah.
Do you want to save this Chris Shilzilla article for next time? Just because it's fun.
Yeah, because we'll want to talk about it. We'll save that for Wednesday's show. Yeah. So there you go. Little teaser for Wednesday's show. We got a great analysis by Chris Shilzilla over at CNN Editor at Large, who we like to make fun of. So there you go. Okay.
Good. Yeah. Before we land the plane here, we just wrap it up. I do want to make one point about because I see a lot of chat happening with the Mark of the Beast conversation and my little rant there. Yeah. So the same people who are saying that the vaccine is going to kill everybody are the same people who say that if you take the Mark of the Beast, then you can't buy or sell, or the passport, if you will. Right. It's all these little details. So my thing is, okay, the vaccines are killing people. It's a genocide. But if you don't take the Mark of the Beast in the scriptures,
then it's also a genocide.
It's a genocide. You get killed. Right. That's the whole purpose of not taking. So
that is an interesting. Yeah, that I didn't really work it through like that. Yeah, in that interpretation, that means just every single person is going to die.
Yeah,
regardless of vaccine status.
I think people overestimate this idea of, hey, we got to protect ourselves from the Mark of the Beast. It's like, no, when you reject it, it's literally life or death. That, hey, if you reject the mark, you're going to be slain. That's what it says in the scriptures.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so don't take the mark, and also trust in God, because you're probably going to get killed. And there's not going to be this like, oh, let's form a commune that fights against the mark of the beast. No. Right. It's not going to be like that.
Scripture does not say, don't take the mark of the beast so you can live out a long, healthy life.
In the mountains.
In the mountains away from society. No, you just straight up get killed immediately.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Anyway, just
that's
want to
why
point
you
that
got
out.
to take all of the details into account and not just cherry pick allegorical ones that you can apply to a situation that you can write an article about. Okay, well, there you go. Cool. Wow. This is a very reasonably length show, and we're going to get out of here.
Yep.
And so thank you very much, everybody, for hanging in with us. Again, thank you to all the producers of the show. We'll be you'll get the credit for this show, but we'll be thanking our producers in full on Wednesday's show, which will be, well, you heard it here on Wednesday. That'll be September 8th. So make sure to tune back in for that. But I do want to, we had a bunch of producers come in during the show. I was going to run through the list, but we don't have a full list. So we'll thank all of our producers for next show. If you're on a streak, remember, you will get your streak for this show, but to keep that going, you want to come in for next episode as well, just to make that clear. But thank you to everybody for making this show possible. I do want to, one more time, let everybody know that Ravel dropped. Ravel dropped yesterday. There's 3 full-length episodes there for you. I'd recommend you listen to them in order. And if you missed the top of the show, yes, Ravel is a new podcast that finally happened. We're going to put it out 2 years ago, but things happened, and here we are, and it's there. And if you could, please, as a personal favor, leave a rating and a review for Ravel. That would help us gain ground on the turf war for the other podcast that stole our name.
They kind of stole your design too. I got to be honest. I think they sort of took your idea with the artwork and took that too. It's kind of crazy.
It makes me suspicious that maybe it was somebody who listened to us 2 years ago.
Oh, noticed that
when I was pitching it, they noticed that that it never dropped and never got into full swing. So they kind of took the concept, took the design, and ran with it without asking or talking to me. They could have just sent an email and asked, but they didn't. Anywho, there you go. Thank you very much for that. Go check it out. Share it with your friends. That's Ravel. I'm hearing from the chat that if you're on Apple Podcasts and you're searching for Ravel, search it in all lowercase, because that is how it is listed. I have it in all lowercase. It was a design choice. So maybe that'll help you. Okay, there you go. We'll be back on Wednesday. Remember, we will need producers for Wednesday's show, and you can do that by heading on over to patreon.com/CCNT, or you can head on over to CanaryCry.Radio.com/support.
CanaryCry.Radio.com/support.
That's right. We're a value for value show, folks. We put out the value. We do it as much as we possibly can, and we try our very hardest at it. And if you get any value out of the show, you can support us. And it's not just charity, not just a donation. You become a producer of the show, because this is the real world. So if you haven't done it yet, please consider us for Wednesday and go ahead and produce the show so we can keep it going, folks. But you can help out the show in a lot of ways. You can, if you're a creative person, you can send in art. You can send in jingles and music. Thank you to those who sent in stuff for this episode. Again, we'll be featuring that on next episode. But if you are one of those types of people and you want your art or music or jingles or whatever, make sure it's about the show. It's for the show, by the show. We'll feature it on the show. You can send that to CanaryCryRadio@gmail.com or CanaryCryRadio radio@protonmail.com. You can also help out the show by leaving ratings and reviews. We got a quota. We're shooting for 5 ratings and reviews. And it's been a couple of weeks since we've hit the quota. And I know it's because people out there are thinking, oh, it's not that important. Oh, other people do it. I mean, a lot of people listen to this show. Surely some other 5 people will leave a rating and review. No, they won't, because they're thinking the same thing. So if you haven't left a rating and a review, please search for Canary Cry News Talk on Apple Podcasts. If you have an Apple product, all Apple products come preloaded with Apple Podcasts. Just search your device for Apple Podcasts. It's a little purple icon. Search Canary Cry News Talk, subscribe to it, and leave a rating and a review. It helps out the algorithms quite a bit. Puts them into overdrive. It shares the show with people who have never heard or seen it before, and the numbers don't lie, folks. When y'all respond and leave 5 ratings and reviews, hundreds of new people find the show every single week, and that's thanks to you. So hey, they'll thank you someday. But you can also share the show by just sharing it on your social media. Share it out to your friends, text it to your friends. Or your family, or you can hit the share button or just copy and paste the link. Or if you're really creative, you can go ahead, take the podcast, but play it out loud in your freezer and put some water in the ice cube trays, and play the podcast to the ice. The water will freeze, trapping the podcast inside of the ice cubes, and then you can have some people over for a dinner party or a cocktail party or something. You can put that ice into their drinks. The ice will melt. The podcast will go into their delicious, smoothie that you made them, and then they'll just drink it on down. They'll drink the podcast, become a huge fan, and start listening to the show. It's an incredible way. It really works. So however you want to do it, go ahead and share the show. We like to call it rattling cages. And if you need any other instructions, here's what you do. You walk right up to them, you grab them by the cage, and then you shake it.
The end of the world occurred pretty much as we had predicted.
I want to shake things up, stir up some controversy, rattle a few cages. Hey, stop that! You'll never silence me. I'm the last angry man, a crusader for the little guy. Leave the bird alone. Never. Rattle a few cages. Rattle a few cages.
The human race will have every opportunity to improve.
And if they don't?
Ask Noah.
That's right. Just ask Noah. All right, Gons, any last words?
Hope everyone has a good Labor Day, rest of the Labor Day anyway. And I love that Basil is referred to as, quote, our masked hero in one of the customer reviews of Ravel. You're a masked hero, Basil.
That's right. I've finally done it. I'm a masked hero.
Okay. But masks don't work, by the way, just so you know. That's
true. Oh, yeah. That review was left long before masks had such a different connotation now. Jeez Louise. All right. Okay. You good?
I'm good, yes.
All right.
See you guys Wednesday.
Make sure to tune back in on Wednesday, folks. And thanks for listening to this episode of Canary Cry News Talk. Make sure to tune in next time. But until then, think outside the cage.
Get your dater.
A dater.
I am vaccine.
A dater.
Vaccinations.
A dater.
I do it with everyone.
A dater.
State and federal health officials.
A dater.
Everybody loves waffles.
A dater.
Remember, reality is an illusion. The universe is a hologram. Bye, gold. Bye.
I want to shake things up, shake things up. I want to shake things up, shake things up. Leave the bird alone. I want to stir up some controversy. I want to rattle a few cages. I'm the last angry man. You'll never silence me. I'm the last angry man. I'm the last angry man. You'll never silence me. I'm the last angry man. A crusader for the little guy. Well, we'll see about that.
Whatever, Illuminati. Subscribe, bell button, all. Like.
subscribe, bell button.
You're under arrest for crimes against science.
Vaccinations. Billions.
Fun fact, I believe it was...
State federal health officials.
Another fun fact.
Screw your freedom.
Fun fact.
I wrote the bill.
Another fun fact.
Brings me back to my Screamo days.
Come on, man.
It was really a productive segment, man.
Come on, man.
Keep yapping, man.
In the future, humans will be confined in a people's zoo.
I'll keep you safe and warm in my people's zoo.
120 days.
I'll keep you safe and warm now in my people's zoo. You, yeah, you in my people's zoo. I'll keep the cameras on in my people's zoo. I'll keep the cameras on now in my people's zoo.
Aborted feces.
You, yeah, you in my people's zoo.
FDA, when they get the data,
Hunt you down and make you pay.
Everybody out there offered a vaccine. Don't ask any questions. Please take it.
I'll make you fat and sassy in my people's zoo.
Everybody loves waffles. Everybody loves waffles.
Make you fat and sassy in my people's zoo.
Vaccinations.
I'll keep you warm and safe in my people's zoo.
Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths.
We're all gonna die.